Hey, welcome to our book club for the Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. I'm really happy you're here. If you would like to join the discussion, follow the link in the description to r/Sanderson, where we will be having discussions about this. Let us know there what you like about this format, what you think we could do better, what you would be looking forward to from future book clubs from us. And for now, just enjoy the discussion.
Hey, welcome back to Brandon's Book Club. I'm your host, Matt Hatch, and we're so excited to get started talking all about the Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. I barely got through that one. Oh, man. Or what I like to call Frugal Wizard, right? And I'm lucky enough to be hosting this rounded table discussion with some fellow wizards here. So without further ado, let me introduce or have them introduce themselves. And maybe let's start with you, Steve.
Hi, so I am Steve Argyle. I got to draw a lot of the cool things in this book. I've done some stuff for the Cosmere as well, and I'm really excited to talk about this story and some of the art too.
I like how you're like, some of the art here. So we're excited to have you. Yeah.
I spent a bit of time on it, so I am excited to talk about it, and I will try to be as humble as possible.
And then Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Payne. I'm an artist, and I'm not allowed to say the things that I am doing for Dragonsteel.
Ooh, I like it.
It's really cool, though.
We're gonna spend 3 episodes here trying to figure that out. No. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
Joshua.
Yeah, so I'm Joshua Bilmes at Jabberwocky Agency, and I've represented Brandon for his entire career. 20 years ago, we were in that moment when an editor had said he wanted to buy Elantris, and we were patiently waiting for the actual offer to come through.
This is the moment you were working all 20 years for, sitting down, talking about Frugal Wizard with us, right? This was it. This was it. Last but not least, Wren.
Hi, my name is Wren. I'm a filmmaker and engineer and armchair Cosmere scholar. I'm an enthusiast, and so I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to share the table with you guys today and talk about some wizarding stuff.
Yeah. What's awesome about this, Wren, because I am not a Cosmere scholar of any sort. And so for those of you, just some quick housekeeping before we can begin. If you're watching this, no, there's no Cosmere spoilers. So there you go. You don't have to worry about that.
The one book that's not a Cosmere book is the one that I'm here for. And you know what? I am not upset about it.
Okay, well, good. And the last point to keep in mind is, we've all read the books, so there's going to be some spoilers. We're going to start here with part 1, tackling chapters 1 through 12. But of course, we're going to reference things that happen later on in the books, things we found out about our characters. So just know if you're watching this and you've only made it up to chapter 12, some things might be spoiled. Maybe come back later. So that's it. Without further ado, what I think is great is the book begins with part 1 called The White Room. And Brandon explained this, because I guess I hadn't been familiar with the terminology, but like a White Room story is where a character kind of awakens, doesn't know who he is, and kind of there's the discovery moment along with the reader of finding out who they are. Is for you, Steve, like, have you read other White Room stories, and did this one work for you?
I thought this one worked really well because, you're coming from the Cosmere, and Brandon has so much already built that if this were a Cosmere book, it wouldn't matter. You would already know so much about it, and you'd be reading into every tiny little piece of it. And so I really liked how it was a White Room for everything, for all of us. We don't know when, where, who this guy is. Is it magic? Is it sci-fi? We don't know. We didn't even know the title until a lot of us got the book.
Yeah, true.
So I thought it was really interesting that it was just the whitest room you can make. And it did work for me. I'm not always a fan of the amnesia. Sometimes it feels like, well, that's the easy way to do a lot of exposition, right? This one, no. This one really felt like that was part of the character's journey. And so we got to see a lot of different facets because he didn't know who he was. He was trying to figure out who he was, and rather than just like, here's how we're going to explain it to the audience.
Yeah.
It was him figuring it out, and we were along for the ride.
Yeah, Wren, did it hit you also? Do you like this idea of memory loss and discovery along with the reader? Do you dig into that mystery side of it?
I do, because I had no idea what was going on, and neither did the main character, so I felt like we were in the journey together. I mean, do you guys know of any other like famous examples of White Room type narratives? I know there's the Born Identity is the famous.
Memento is
of
the
course.
first one that comes to my mind.
I mean, Born Identity, obviously. And it's weird because Born Identity, I can go back and kind of like keep watching over and over. Like, I know what's going to happen, but there's something, I don't know. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's something human inside of you. It's like the discovery of something new and watching it happen and being part of it.
I particularly liked how the character's response to thinking that he was a cosplayer at first, because he doesn't know his history. He knows like English and his skills and whatnot. He's like, oh, I'm not a cosplayer, am I? Dang it. It's like, oh, burn.
Is this a Ren fair?
Katie, what would you like to, if you were kind of put in that situation, you woke up, you couldn't remember anything, is there something you think that would kind of peek through of like, please let me not be this. This isn't my career.
Like you wake up and you don't want to be something desperately.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't want to be a cop. And that's what he thought he was.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, it reminded me of Light Song from Warbreaker.
Okay.
That Light Song also is trying to figure out who he is for the majority of Warbreaker. So Brandon said in the book he hadn't written a blank slate story before, but I kind of felt like he had with Light Song.
That's a good point.
And I think one of the interesting things to me about John is I don't know how like adaptive on my feet I am. Like I feel like I've been in this comfortable life that I know what I'm doing, and if you put me in a setting like this, I would just be kind of completely batshit crazy and not know what to do. And it's almost not like a White Room because the character just kind of so quickly adjusts to the idea with this kind of poise that I don't think I could ever bring to something myself, that the White Room part of it very quickly starts to recede into the distance from me. And Brandon, over the course of his career, we have so many characters that have layers that we don't know, or even the characters don't know, that remain for us to be explored, that like half of Brandon's work is in some way a White Room, even if the characters don't know it the way this one does.
That's true. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
One of the things that I find interesting is that the character himself changes according to what he thinks he was. And that's an interesting take on his personality and his growth, remembering things like when he thinks he's a cop, he starts behaving like a cop. He starts trying to think like a cop. When he realizes, oh, no, I was a thug. He behaves totally different, but he's still the same at the core. It's like he's just looking at himself from different angles to figure out what he really is.
Yeah, I think but he also is just acting too. So he has the thoughts of like, yeah, this is what I think I am. But then he's acting and then he's questioning his thought at the same time, which I love. That's my favorite part is when he's like, why did I run over to that tree so quickly? Why wasn't I willing to kind of just talk to those people? Like, what does that mean? And
Why did I reach for my gun?
Yeah.
What gun? Why would I reach for a gun at all?
Yeah, Katie.
Yeah, well, I noticed, he's questioning, why am I reaching for a gun? And I feel like when he's a blank slate, he's just a good guy who's kind of worried that he has these instincts that are troublesome.
Yeah.
Which is interesting when later on when he realizes what he is and how he feels about it.
Yeah, I can't wait to get to that character all the way down there. But we have to talk about some of the quirks of his character because the reviews. Like, you can't go much further with that. No, so okay, my first thought, what was your Wren, reviews.
Well, at first because I was trying to figure out what his backstory was too, at the same time as he was trying to do, and I was like, oh no, he's not like a professional reviewer, is he? He wasn't like doing unboxing videos back in his dimension. But I don't know, I found it interesting. It added like an extra layer of I don't know if intrigue is the right word, but it made me very curious. Like, why is he looking at everything with this type of perspective? Because a reviewing perspective is very different than just operating through life. And eventually the book kind of delves into like why he was doing that. And we'll get into that, I imagine, probably in like the third episode of this. But yeah, I found it very interesting and not really sure where it was going, but I was down for the ride.
And we do find out why, but I didn't ever connect the two in the end, and maybe we can dig into that a little bit later. But yeah, the review thing, I guess for me, my personality, I am the kind of person that will go leave a review because I want people to know, like, what are they going to experience? Did it work for you, Katie, when he was like talking about the tree, for example, and he was like, 3 stars, would return. I don't know, he said something like really quippy.
He really likes to review things, doesn't he? It just is a character quirk. I personally, I have the hardest time rating things. As a creative person, I think it's almost violent to take a creative, a creation that someone poured so much everything into and then just sum it up with a number.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
It's like, anytime I review anything, I'm always like, 5 out of 5. I feel really guilty. If anything below a 5.
I did have a friend, he didn't spend a lot of time on the internet, and he was like, why would you ever give something a 4? And I said, I didn't like it as much as a 5. He's like, no, you always do 5 out of 5. That's what you do.
Fun fact, that is exactly why YouTube got rid of the 5-star rating system.
Oh, does they?
For a very long time, you could rate YouTube videos 1 to 5 stars, but they found that literally everyone only ever rated things 5 stars or 1 stars. There was rarely anything in between, and that's why they went to just the like or dislike system.
But not John. John was giving us
He
some
was one of the
reviews.
people most upset about YouTube's change, for sure.
I don't know, Steve, what do you feel? How'd you, like, did it work for you? Like, was it off-putting?
I thought it was a fun quirk, and I also like that he was anthropomorphizing everything as he was rating it. You know, like, you're a good tree. I mean, you're not the best tree. You could have more limbs, but, 3 out of 5, Mr. Tree. Like, he kind of had that childlike view of the world where everything had a personality of its own, and I found that really endearing.
Yeah.
It was charming, yeah.
He had that, and he had Carp DM. He had his little quirks.
Carp DM, is this Joshua? Carp DM, is that something you're going to start saying more often?
My mother was fond of carpe diem, and I don't want to take it from her. But to talk about the whole rating system right now, like, I was ready to give one of my Uber drivers 4 on the trip I was on right before this, but then you're asked, why is it only a 4? And I'm thinking, like, 4 isn't a bad grade. Why am I suddenly being asked to kind of explain why it's only a 4? And it just said, well, I guess it'll be a 5. It gets back to so it is kind of refreshing in a world where there are a lot of kind of it's good or it's bad, and we're not supposed to say like 2 things can be true at once, or, it's complicated that this character is actually just kind of
Reacting,
rolling with the flow. Yeah.
Okay,
I liked that it made it seem that his perspective on everything was not black and white, though. It's like he was able to actually see that complexity in things and being able to judge things accordingly, and not being like, oh, it's only a 4 out of 5. This driver was driving through way too many red lights, and he was able to actually judge it.
Yeah. I mean, for those of you that are watching, I'm really curious if this worked or not as a storytelling device or as a characterization. And if you liked this review, or if you had a favorite one, did anyone here have a favorite review? Did they recall? Was there one that stuck out to you? I mean, that's why I brought up the one about the tree. I think it was right at the beginning. Rating trees to me, it's just like the idea of leaning into a tree was hilarious. I thought that was really funny. Anyone remember it? You might not remember the exact rating.
I wish I could remember something like that off the top of my head.
But I really did love the bit about the trees, like not great at shade, or, not thinking of it. It's just, you know, it's fresh, it's fun, it's
humorous, for
different.
sure, yeah.
It's a lot of what I like about the book, that it's just fresh and fun and feels different than not just other of Brandon's work, but a lot of other anything out in the world.
For me, it was strangely off-putting the first time it happened. I was like, what
I will agree with that. It was like,
go-"
wait, what?
It took me out, if that makes sense. Like, and it had that kind of like modernizing, and maybe that was on point for what was the reaction wanted of, like, it brought me to today, right? Like I started thinking of all the reviews I've ever done, right? I was like, I don't know how I've ever rated a tree. I've never rated a tree. Maybe I should start rating trees, right? It kind of took me out in that way, but it did connect me to him, as in, oh, he's definitely from my time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so
It's the first
that's where I
connection you have
connect.
that he's not from medieval England.
Yes, right.
There's one other bit of connective tissue, though, because his ratings help tie the character together with the Frugal Wizard inserts, which come in, I don't know if that's intentional or planned, but the Frugal Wizard inserts are just so completely different from the book itself. But the way the character does the ratings is a tie between the tone and the idea of what those interludes provide and the very different world of the book.
Yeah, that's
Hadn't even thought of that. Till
that was good. I was like,
but I think
But by the way, and on a reread, like I was almost anticipating. Like I was like, I can't wait to hear his review. So it really does. I don't know if you've gone back and read them a second time, but they really worked for me that way.
This book has not been out that long. I didn't have the honor of working on it all, so I just barely got through this in time for this.
Well, I'm telling you, if you go back, I think that's when it worked even better for me. Katie, you brought up carpe diem. Okay, that's another quirk of John, or Johnny, I guess, is also.
He doesn't like
Not
Johnny.
Johnny.
He doesn't like Johnny.
Runian.
Runian. Yeah, I actually, honestly, I prefer Runian.
That's a cool name.
Okay, raise your hands. Do you prefer Runian? I prefer
Runian's
Runian.
cool.
It's a pretty dang cool
Yeah.
name.
John West, I was like, Runian's better. Well, the handbook. He had carpe diem. We had his reviews, but the handbook. What did you think about the handbook and how basically that came into play? Like you talked about the interludes. Yeah, like how did it?
I was hungry for the handbook because of the world building.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of why I love Brandon's books. He's a really good world builder.
The world building, was it something that you dug in? Like as soon as you got it, you were like, awesome, this is like a guidepost. I need to learn more. Or is it just kind of like a fun thing to have?
It was both. So I have a bad habit. I never thought I'd been on camera. And it's when I read Brandon's books, if I'm really just honed in on a character arc and story, I will just skip the interludes and the extras. So I did that a lot in this book. But then when I finished and I comprehended John's story, I went back and I read them, and it made me love the book even more. It world built before my eyes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, Steve, did you have a similar kind of experience, or did you actually like dig into those, or did you kind of go back and did you want to know the building as you went, or did you kind of?
I wanted lots more of the handbook itself. That was my favorite part, and I dug in because I knew I was going to be illustrating those. But what I thought was really interesting, what I liked about it is it gave us like a fourth time period, because we have medieval England. That's where we start. And then it's like, okay, he's kind of from our time or something, because he talks like us, he thinks like us, he has references of kind of our time period. Then we find out there's some future stuff, right? He has nanites, there's dimensional travel. But the handbook itself is written like an early 19th century advertising book.
Well, it's funny.
It's and it's so filled with just obvious propaganda and lies, right? It's like, oh, everything's great. You're gonna have such a fun time. We're the cheapest. We're the safest. We're the best. And it's got that feel of that insincere marketing that still exists, but that was the flavor in the.
It reminds me of your drawings.
But that's one of my favorite parts is when it says that this is officially registered as a marketing claim, because we have the law that puffery, you can say kind of anything under the law, and trying to always figure out where the boundary line is between when a company can just say whatever it wants because it's puffy. So I just loved every time one of their claims is tagged as this is an officially registered piece of bull.
Asterisk. That was just a marketing terminology.
Well, the funniest one, it says, it's not dangerous. And then they go down the bottom, it says, it absolutely is dangerous. You can't sue us we're saying it for marketing. Just don't sue us, please.
It had a Wizard of Oz aspect, the wizard, it's kind of just I don't believe what you're selling me on this idea. Wren, what were your reaction to the handbook and what you read there?
Because most of my favorite books that I typically read that are not Sanderson books are sci-fi. And so I love sci-fi. And when I started realizing what Sanderson was doing with the story here, and that it's actually not time travel, it's just dimension hopping. And I love that idea of just infinite realities out there that can branch out at any point in history, and to be able to replicate the idea of going back in time by just choosing the right dimension that didn't really evolve over the course of those 1,000 years. I found that to be very fascinating. I just found myself really wanting to learn more and more and more, especially as he started unlocking more of his abilities and memories.
Is this one of our questions for Brandon? When are we getting the handbook? Is that something we need to ask? When everyone out there is watching, do you want the handbook? We need to send Brandon a note. Give us the entire thing.
So I hope this does not become the new version of when are we going to get the in-world book Way of Kings written by Noah Don, which I get asked all the time. Or when are we going to get the full writings of Alendi from Mistborn? You are never going to get the actual Frugal Wizard's Handbook written by Cecil G. Bagsworth III. That is not a thing that I'm going to spend a lot of time doing. I am very, very sorry, Matt.
Steve can illustrate it.
Or, now that I think about it, maybe that'll be a waste because
It'll be a while.
Can you believe it? Maybe you can't really believe it, so maybe it would just be fun to. I think to your point, Josh, it would just be fun to read from.
I just loved. Because the idea of doing the interludes, if you look at the history of the genre, Isaac Asimov, did that a lot in one of his series, and it's become a kind of gimmick in a way, or a crutch that let me give introduction this way that I just don't know how to fit into the book itself. And this practically reinvents it. It just takes something that's become trite and just turns it into it dials it to 12 or whatever, and just makes it fresh, fun. It's everything that I like about the book.
Yeah, I think Brandon mentions at the end, I think in the postscript or whatever, I think he talks about hoping to it's a way to kind of bring some levity to it. And it sounds like from what we're all talking about, that's exactly what we felt.
Yeah.
There were moments where I was like, okay, I want to know more about John or Runian, okay, this is fun, but tell me more, right? Tell me more about his story. Let me hear more about him. So there were moments where I was like, okay, I get it. Maybe I want to see these later or come back to them. I kind of had that same.
And instead, you learned about talking bananas.
No, but see, I'm kind of like you read, I love, and people might know my love of the Wheel of Time. And so when it comes to alternate realities and dimension hopping, if you will, that's right in my ballpark.
By the way, that was my favorite panel when it just said, "Can I have talking bananas?" And it just says no.
Okay, but it says no, but then it comes back and explains it.
But
right?
why can't I have talking bananas? Yeah. Well, let me explain.
Have any of you had to write FAQs and anticipating people's questions? That's what I've worked with websites for so long, building software apps. and the amount of like FAQs of like explain why people can or can't use it this way. And that's what every time I read it, I was like, oh man, I remember having to write these frequently asked questions. And that's what it felt like. Like, can you do this? No, you can't.
Was your experience that you continually underestimated how dumb some of the questions people could have?
Yes. Like that's
Like, oh, this doesn't need to be in the FAQ. It's obvious. Then you're like, it's not obvious.
yes, that's totally, and maybe that's the moment with the banana, is it kind of jumped the shark a little bit. I was like, this is how stupid these questions get. But then they explained it, which I thought was amazing.
I had that moment with Matt, who had to point out to me that the chapter numbers weren't at the start of the chapter. They were just at the top of the page.
Well, they're there too. They're there too. It's just that's a code, right?
Oh yeah, good point. I didn't.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Katie's revealing to me. I didn't even notice that.
The people at 17th Shard explained that to me.
Oh, okay. Shout out to 17th Shard in chat here. Nice job. So now we're all, by the way, just staring at our books, going, "Oh yeah, I totally."
So I would like to point out that this book actually reminded me of a different book series that I really enjoyed called Off to Be the Wizard. If you've ever heard of that. It's a very, very similar tone in that there's a modern day person who is able to actually time travel back to medieval England, but only because he finds a text file that allows him to edit reality around him. Turns out everything's just a simulation. And so he ends up getting in trouble and he escapes by going back to the Middle Ages, where he learns that there's a bunch of other people who have also discovered the same file. And now they're all just a community of wizards living in the Middle Ages, but they're just modern people. And so at first I was like, oh wow, this is going a very similar direction as that. But then when it started revealing that Runian is from the far future, and that it was actually pure technology that got them through this, and it wasn't actually time travel, it started becoming more intriguing to me, because now it was different from that other book, because the tone is very similar.
Yeah. I think it's kind of as we go here, and I know maybe you're watching going like, are they ever going to get to the part where we meet Cephawin? And Elston, we're getting there. But I think you're right. There's that connection. This was my connection. I know this doesn't sound ridiculous. So we had the clearing, right? Fist raise is like something I can't remember. It's like the first words. He's like, he wakes up, he's alert or something. And I don't know why I immediately saw Dresden there. Like, I don't know if you've read Dresden Files, but like to me, it was like, as a wizard, and I think, oh, well, Frugal Wizard, and I was like, wizard. And someone that wakes up and doesn't know where they're at in the middle of an explosion with their fist raised, I was like, oh yeah, this reminds me a lot about like that kind of wizard, if you will. So I immediately in my head had the idea of Dresden for this character, and it took me a while to get out of that. Like, I don't know if you felt like that, where you were like, I've read a book like this, and then where did it distance? Where did you finally embed into this story outside of other White Room stories that you had read? Was there a moment that you remember where you're like, now I'm embedded in?
Absolutely. It was when he started describing the idea of dimensions and all of that, and that was where it started feeling fresh to me. Not that it would have been bad the other way. I was just,
sure, yeah.
But that was the moment where it started going, okay, this is now an original story in my mind.
Did you all have a moment where you'd heard stories similarly, but then you invested in, or was it from the very get-go you were in?
I was in pretty much from the beginning. I had assumed it's just a little bit like, it's a book from Brandon. It's not going to be something that I'm going to be able to predict. And so I just kind of accepted that from the beginning. It's like, I don't know where it's going, and I'm not going to try.
I refuse.
Because like, even though the story is a White Room type narrative, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're coming in with that White Room as well. We're all coming in with like preconceived notions of how this story is going to play out. And as it continues to deviate, like dimensions do even,
That's a good way to
start accepting more and more about what's being told, and not, trying to anticipate what it's going to be.
Yeah. Maybe it's a good moment to jump into some of these characters. I know we were just talking about him, but Katie, did you like or dislike John or Runian immediately when you met him?
Sure, he was just some guy I was learning about, and he was learning about himself, and he was funny, and sure.
Who's your next favorite, or who's ended up being your favorite character in kind of this early part of the book?
Oh gosh. Oh, by the end, I loved Cephawin.
Cephawin?
Yeah.
And I loved Earlston. Is that how you say his name?
Eelston?
Eelston?
I get the picture from this book. They just have fun with however you want to pronounce it. I say Aylston, I'm sure.
What a solid dude.
Yeah.
Earlston, or yeah.
I think he's my favorite, yeah.
Yeah. At one point, they call him like a puppy. John does. He's just a nice puppy standing beside me. And yeah, anyway, we can talk about it later.
Yeah, no, but I didn't like it. Like, I read that, and I remember thinking, like, no, this dude is like, I like him better. Like, I'm not sure about you, but I'm sure about Aylston.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I
Yeah,
kind of had that
yeah.
reaction in that moment. Anyone else favorite kind of character stand out early for you?
Cephawin was my favorite character almost from the get-go. Elston grew on me, right? At first, I was just like, oh yeah, he's the guy in charge. He's gonna kind of be the stiff, stuffy guy. But of course, nothing's ever quite as it seems when when Brandon's writing it. But Cephawin, she had such a great character where she was struggling with her life, her faith, all of this stuff the whole time, just trying to put on a strong front. And it's like deep down, she felt like she was a fake. She didn't know if her religion was fake, but it's the only thing she had, right? So she just kept clinging to it, even though it kept over and over again. Elston was like, this isn't working, right? Like, Woden is not answering your prayers. Why do you keep doing this? And it was interesting to see her journey from strong front, but weak inside, really insecure, but, still the badass on the outside, to finally finding herself and becoming like a super badass.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, you talking just now and thinking about the illustration you did and her character moment, I just had chills.
Thank you.
So, like, I typically want to read a story once, but I like Cephawin so much that if there was like the Ender Shadow version of this book that was told from her point of view, I would buy that in an instant.
Yeah.
Like, you just feel the layers of her character, the depths, just her ability to just quietly sit back and witness. And I would love to know what she actually saw and witnessed in the book from her point of view.
Oh, man. That's true. Like, Brandon's got to give us that, right? How you? I'm kind of curious. I can't wait to see in chat what people are saying or in
Her
comments.
and John. Aw.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because she would give us like that first person view of the world. Because that's the part that I struggled with the most, was like, how does this all work? And what are scops? And what are like...
Her boast.
How do you battle with boasts? What do you mean?
I meant for us all to like write a boast. Just like out of the blue, come up with your own boast right now. No, but yeah.
I am great. That's a boast, right?
But her boast reminded me, I did have a question for Brandon. And it was when I was reading the book, I remembered in the preface that, Brandon, you said that you had your friend Dr. Michael Livingstone, because he's an expert on medieval history, and he had you read a book. And as I'm reading this book, there were so many moments where I stopped and I Googled something, like, what is an earl? What is Woden? Oh, it's Odin, and then I read it and it's like actually historical. These are historical things. And like Brandon said in the book, like, you might think these people don't have teeth, but they do. And that's probably something he learned in this book. And I want to know what the book was that he read.
So one of the main reasons I picked this time period as opposed to the Titanic or something else, which I was considering, is I'm pretty familiar with this period already. I wouldn't call myself an Anglo-Saxon scholar, but it is an area of armchair interest to me that I've read on and studied for many, many years. I'm not sure if I can point to one book. I mean, if you want to read something that's from this period, the Saxon Tales are quite excellent. But more it's that whenever an article comes up, whenever I see something interesting, I kind of focus in on this and file it away. I needed this book to be the thing that kept my momentum in writing these secret projects. And so I needed something that I just already knew. That doesn't mean, like I said, that I'm 100% expert in this. I'm not. But because I knew I potentially had some help from Michael Livingston in my back pocket, I wrote the book and then I went to Dr. Livingston and said, help fix this, what'd I get wrong? And I didn't get that much wrong. I was quite pleased. He had a couple comments per chapter about things I could do better, but none of it was major structural stuff. It was just little hints here and there. So I was quite pleased that I was able to get that mostly right on my own.
Okay, yeah. That's
Well, I mean, Brandon's coming into this with a lot of like Anglo-Saxon knowledge already, and he was saying that like he tried to get everything as accurate as he could, but then he went to the expert and had him like sort of like correct him on stuff, and he was very proud of the stuff that he was able to get right, and was like, I guess I didn't get that part right too, but he got the teeth
That's
right.
true.
You got the teeth right.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they didn't have sugar back then, so like you know, people would lose teeth, but the teeth wouldn't rot out like you would see later in history and more recently, modern times today.
Interesting. Yeah, I was not as smart as you were, Katie. I did not look things up. I just languished and like, I don't understand. And I just kept
Well, you're
going,
reading on
right?
the phone. It's easy. You can just hold it down and it's just look up.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I kind of languished in that like Runian, right? Like I was with them like, I don't know what's going on, and maybe, as I went back, I did go back and reread it. And each time I go like, okay, I want to know more about the world. So I love that idea of that you brought up, Joshua. Now I can't get over it, of Cephawin's story and learning more about how she got to that point. What brought her to that moment before she met Runian, because she is, go ahead.
It was funny, I'd Google everything and then arse. I'm like, and he did, John's like, what is arse? Is it, he thought ears or something. And then later he learned, it
actually
means your butt. He's calling me a butt. Yeah.
Were there things about Cephawin, other things that stuck out about her that made her maybe more endearing or not, or you didn't connect with her?
I like that she was a skeptic. She was always trying to like figure out what the grift was that John was doing, and trying to figure out what his game was.
Yeah.
Even though she's a woman of faith and the boasts and everything that she's doing as a scop, I found it very interesting that she didn't just take the fact that he's a mystical elf at face value. She was like, no, there's something, you're doing some tricks here. So I like that sort of approach of trying to like, analytically look at the world and try to figure out why things are doing why things are the way they are, while also simultaneously being like, yeah, of course there's gods. That's why we leave food out for them.
Yeah.
It's like, interesting.
Well, because I felt like it was almost like she was being, with her faith, felt like she was defending her people, right? And so she definitely, and it sounded like Runian or John had that same understanding. He's like, wait a second, these people are always fighting for their lives, right? He has that moment because he's talking to Elston and he's like, wait, tell me about how old are you? And like, wait, you've lost sons and all this. And so it kind of, when I kind of read that, I think I settled into Cephawin's, at first I was kind of like, John, like what's going on? Like, why is she so skeptical about him? But then I was like, oh, I get it. Like she's there regardless of how she's feeling or her insecurities. Like I think you brought that up, or her kind of questions. She's like, no, other people are here and I'm supposed to be protecting my people. That's why.
And I think, Matt, that gets to a really good point in this, and which we touched on earlier, was the book isn't binary, kind of. And her character, a lot of books like this, there's this place where you think somebody is your friend and then you realize they're your enemy and everything turns on a dime. And she's able to actually juggle the skepticism in each moment with the fact that, well, skeptic or not, there's something that needs to be done, but it never feels quite like the classic version in a movie or TV show where you're basically doing one thing at once.
Yeah, good point. She's pragmatic somewhat there too, right? Because she's like, I have to go find my brother. And she could have just said, no, you can't come with, right? I don't believe. but yeah, it's more complex. There's a complexity to her that I think, again, give us that book, Brandon, about Cephawin's story. I kind of want to hear her thoughts. Katie, it seemed like you had I don't know if you had a comment. Yeah.
Well, because he mentioned the elf thing.
Yeah.
And I had feelings about that. As someone that spends a disproportionate amount of time drawing things that Brandon has written, and I know that he has a resistance to certain fantasy tropes, and the one that he said he'll really just do is dragons, and the one that he's never said that he will do is elves. And I feel like this is the closest thing to a Cosmere elf we've gotten, and it's not even a real elf.
He very specifically never really said elf specifically throughout the whole book. It was always Ilv or
No. Wait, I thought Ryan later says to him.
You're
so
right.
you're an elf, but it's Ryan that says it.
No,
right?
I was confused too, but I Googled it, and it's another real term thing.
What's so funny about that is I had to wait until Ryan said it. Like, it's sitting there.
Yeah,
I should
to
have
be
understood it. They describe it a million times in the book. They're telling you. She repeatedly introduces him to people like, yeah, he's an elf.
He's an elf.
He's an elf. Like, I even say it.
He's an elf.
And they're like, which is so weird. I verbalized it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, elf. and the entire time, until Ryan said it, and I was like, oh, okay.
So I actually got to admit, I listened to this book on my first read through. And so I understand how most of these words are pronounced, but I have no idea how any of them are spelled.
So how is that, what's the proper pronunciation that you heard?
Oh gosh.
tell
there
us.
were multiple ones, but it was like Ilv.
Ilv?
That what? I
It's like there's a slight I before the L, before the V after the L, but it's like not quite pronounced. It's like Ilv. I'm not gonna be good at like pronouncing this. I'm just saying.
I love that. One of the ones I took note of about Cephawin was her interactions with Runian, when he would say stuff that she wouldn't believe, and I have this one quote written down. She said, "Look, a shooting star, a constellation that looks like a bear. How fascinating." She would just kind of like in my head, this is how I understood that. She's kind of rolling her eyes, but that's her version of rolling her eyes, if that makes sense. Like, he's saying something ridiculous, and she's just like, "Oh, look, those are pretty clouds." Like, was there any other kind of quirk of Cephawin that stands out to you?
Well, her boasts were a quirk until they did something.
True. Yeah. So, did you believe in the boasts when you heard them? Were you just like, this?
No, of course not.
This is
I was like,
ridiculous.
this is medieval times. They believe a lot of stuff, and there's no way any of this is real. Stay tuned for part 2 and 3.
Were you there? Kind of
Well,
like.
that was the interesting thing is, coming into it, you're like, oh, right, these are people that believe all kinds of things, and he's gonna have all kinds of magic and whatever. They've got their rune stones, and they put out food for their gods and wights and things, and you're just like, yeah, a lot of superstitious, just mumbo jumbo. And then it's like, wait, the food's gone. Like, nobody's been here, and then my shoes are tied. What is going? Like, you start to get just these little hints of, no, magic is real. We don't know how it works. And so the boasts and every other thing that they claimed, you always had to kind of be like, well, I mean, some of this has to be real. We're seeing some of it happen. So are there gods? Or is that superstition? Is that just a regular kind of pantheonic religion? Do the boasts work? Do the rune stones actually have some power attached to them? Like, and that's a question for Brandon. Do the rune stones do anything? Do they have power in themselves, or are they just markers? Or
So, Steve, rune stones. This is a real thing, a thing we have in the historical record. We think they were mostly used for trade and things like that. Maybe they're historical markers also, but they're a real thing. And I, of course, want to incorporate them into the magic system. And so, yes, in the book, these have legitimate magical power. They're basically making the Landswights a little more pliable, so to speak. This is what makes them willing to work with people. It soothes them. Consider it the magical version of the stuff that my wife plugs in that's supposed to smell good to cats and make them not want to fight with each other.
that part I never quite figured out. I don't know if it's in there, but I'm curious.
I think they came from one of the goddess, like Thor or Woden's wife, Freog. I think she made them. There's a little part. I just reread it yesterday. There's a little part where they explain that Freog wrote them, and that's why Woden hates writing, because she died, and he was just really bitter about that.
Yeah.
And he didn't want it around.
Yeah, the mythology.
Yeah.
I was trying to like track
Yeah.
it, and each time I've gone back and read about it, I've been like, oh, I should probably go look up on a Wikipedia article. I'm sure there's gonna be something out there.
For me, it was like the magic system, or the magic existing at all, was such a slow burn for me that I was kind of in denial for at least the first like 12, 13 or so chapters of this book, because I was just like, they're like, the berry disappeared, and I was just like, I must be misunderstanding this. I was just like, I'm missing something here. I didn't know what it was. I just assumed it was going to be, some person came out and like there's a trick going on. I felt like I was actually Cephalwind in this sort of situation where I'm like, no, there's something going on here. That's sneaky. I don't believe it yet. And it wasn't until like later, which we'll discuss in I guess the second part of the series here, that stuff really starts to become solidified, and that's when at least I shared the journey with John here, and starting like coming to that same belief at the same time. It's like, okay, there is a lot more to this than I expected.
Yeah, that was cool.
Changed my worldview.
That was cool for me. I liked that I was so dense. I said, I go back and read it, and I was like, there's clearly something going on, right? But the first time through, I was like, it wasn't until that moment where the ruin on the boat, right? Like, then I was like, what? And I was like,
can't be
there's magic.
just-
And I know for you, it sounded like you kind of really keyed in pretty early. Like, there is definitely magic here.
Yeah, I felt like as soon as the offerings started disappearing, that was my clue that not all of this is made up. So I was curious to see what was real.
Yeah, and there's also just the sense that it isn't going to be just like a sword and sorcery adventure. It is Brandon. You know there's going to be something more to it. And, you're talking about the 17th shard putting you on to the, one of the things with Brandon is that his books work on multiple levels for multiple readers. You can enjoy a Cosmere book, a Stormlight Archive book, without spending a lot of time on the websites, but if you do, then you really, there are many levels of that kind of rabbit hole you can go down. And that all of those layers manage to exist in this. It's the Frugal Wizard fun kind of, it's just on that level is really light, and then boom, you've got everything else.
We're gonna get some deeper stuff coming up.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I can't wait to actually talk about the epilogue. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, so I think it'd be fun to kind of wrap up part one of our discussion here, really digging into maybe some of the plot details. As far as, I think I somehow, I don't know if it was just me, because my brain was like, oh, so it's kind of like gaming. I was like, it felt like there was some gaming aspect to it. I don't know if I've played Age of Empires, all those kind of and I'm building my, when the Frugal Wizard were reading those things, I was like, I think I would totally have liked this. But it did get in my way a little bit from empathizing with some of the characters. It was like, oh, you're coming down from your substantial realm into this thing you purchased, right? And it's a place where you can go play, right? It got in that, and I thought maybe that was the whole purpose, was how do you view, are these real people, right? Do they have real experiences that I should care about as a reader, right? Because I come from another land, right? Because he talked about having his augments, right? And there's all those things. I was like, oh, he's protected, so you can show up, and I'm reading through the package luxury ideas. I was like, I would do the luxury one.
You want the one with the helicopter.
Did any of you have that? As you're reading through they go to the settlement, he gets captured, he gets released, they go on their way to find Worm. Did any of you have a difficulty connecting, this is a real place, and I empathize with it?
I did, in a way, because the Earl and gotta go chasing after the hostage, that, for me, in the early part of the book, it was the fun of the Frugal Wizard stuff that was making up for the fact that the specifics of the mission of the quest were like, whatever. But I was just enjoying the book for the comedy at that point. Like, just really...
Yeah, like the plot hadn't really built enough steam to like just carry its momentum through yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was, and I don't know if it was just because the quest had just begun. Like, Katie, did you have that experience?
Well, yeah, so the inserts, I'm looking at you because you drew the inserts, so I'm blaming you for some of these. The worlds, the marketing, they're trying to sell it to you that you'd want this dimension, and I'm just like, why the heck would I want this dimension? It's so stressful. There's all these people in it. And then in one of them, I just couldn't believe it. The tongue-in-cheek. I'm looking at you because you did this like mecha illustration of it, and that you would play like King of the Castle or like Capture the Flag, or you'd speed, and you'd like, you can give the nanites to the people and see if they survive. And I'm just like appalled thinking about Cephalin, but it was I was like part of the tongue-in-cheek funniness of it. So.
For me, there's a lot of like very complicated morality questions at stake, because it's like, you know, the handbook is very much so like, oh no, it's fine, it's your own dimension, there's no laws here, whatever you think is moral is what is moral. Right. And I'm just going, they're still real people. Just because it's an alternate dimension doesn't make them any less valuable as like, or I don't know if valuable is the right word for it, but like, they're real people with real feelings and emotions and experiences, and the idea of someone being able to just own everyone because it's their dimension, they can do whatever they want because they have the power to do whatever they want, is just kind of like, oh yeah, that's right. I have to remind myself, this is just propaganda. This isn't the actual like sort of idea and justification for the book. It's the handbook, which is propaganda.
Yeah.
And that also gets to all of the hidden depths of the book. When I grew up, like our textbooks, high school or whatever, they were full of like, people parachuting in to tell us about the Bushmen of the Kalahari or the Yanomamo in a way that I don't think you would do today. It was just this very kind of, we're going to parachute in and show these exotic, without any sense of the impact of what's happening. And as light as these inserts are, you're picking up on exactly the thing that's in them is like, this is...
It can get dark.
This is kind of icky. This is icky.
That's what Brandon wrote about, like, I think he said about the inserts was, because this could bring like some levity to what could be. I can't remember the exact verbiage, but like something darker.
Well, and it's saying you could be world emperor, and I just like, but maybe this is marketed for a sociopath or something. I would never want to be world emperor.
I'm curious in chat, would you buy one of these packages? And if so, which one?
I would do it in spite of my biscuits.
Honestly, it was the plotting, the quest that they go on here, that order of events where they're actually, Cephalin, like I started like, wait, her brother... Wait, he shouldn't have got mixed into this. Like if John had just kind of go around finding pages, I think I would have always stayed in that kind of like disconnected place. But because all of a sudden he's like, I'm going to help these people, I'm going to go on this. Plus, I need to figure out who I am. And it was, okay. And as they were traveling and he got to know Cephalin and Elston much better, and they have that, obviously that moment where, the Vikings attack. And for me, that was the moment. There was the moment of the plot where and maybe it was because of his art and their fascination with it. I kind of embedded into the reality of these people.
It's like, oh, this just got real. Okay, there's actual real danger here, and these people are scared.
Yeah, like it got real in that moment. And so, Steve, I don't know if I've seen you shake your head. Yeah, we just thought.
I thought it was really interesting and clever because you get Runian who shows up and he's like, oh, I'm advanced technology myself. I know science, I know chemistry, I know all of this stuff. And then he thinks about it for a second and he's like, I don't know anything because I don't know how to implement any of that knowledge and I don't know how to survive in the woods. I don't know any of that. And for me, that really raised the stakes, right? He shows up, he knows he's the only one who can help because, what's his name? Ulrich.
Yeah.
Ulrich is there. He does know what he's doing. He's equipped. He has a team. And these people have no chance against him. None at all. They don't even understand how little of a chance they have of surviving an encounter with him. So he has to go. But you as the reader see from his point of view, he's totally lost.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to survive even the journey to face him, let alone once you get there. He's got a team of people who are just going to get killed, and he doesn't have any tools. Yeah, he has augments and nanites and stuff, and they don't work.
Yeah.
And he's up against a warlord with a team of cyborgs that are bigger, they're tougher than he is. And since we're all spoilery, it's like one of them has already beat him. So, like, I felt like when they started wandering out, the stakes were very high for me already because I'm like, no one here knows how to tackle this guy.
But it's like, I mean, a TV show for a lot of people talking about, like, Get Smart, would you believe, just that kind of ability to, he's good at lying and he can react on the fly. And he says that in the book multiple times. I don't know what I'm doing, but I can bluff, I can lie, I can do that. At least.
Well, and it does work.
I want to carry this conversation into our discussion of in part 2. I want to kind of dig more into this idea of what would we do? Would we become interdimensional wizards? What is the tech? What is the magic even? And how does this work? And what happens with the Vikings that changes everything? So for those of you that are watching out there, part 2, we'll be digging into that, and we'll definitely be digging into your art. I can't wait. I can't wait to talk about questions.
Awesome.
What is that comic underneath? Like, how is that working? So yeah, make sure you stick around, follow us, and make sure you're back for part 2 of our discussion of the Frugal Wizard's Handbook to Surviving Medieval England. I made it. Thank you.
It is a mouthful.
It is, yeah. So yeah, make sure to join us for part 2. And right now, before you leave, you can enter for a chance to win a copy. Yes, like this, not this one, but a copy of the Frugal Wizard's Handbook to Surviving Medieval England that's signed by all of these wonderful people, including Brandon. And if you want to do that, you just have to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, plus your best boast, which is an optional part of that, right?
It shouldn't be optional. Boast away.
You heard Ren say,
Let me
make sure
see
you...
your boast.
I want to see your best boast. Let's go.
Yeah, honestly, we're going to go back and look at these and then be back for part 2, where we'll announce the winner of the signed book. We can't wait to see you guys.
Thanks for watching.